if I was looking at a few of the presentations earlier today, there has been some discussion, panel discussion, and some of the keynotes that talk about bringing your own algorithm. I would consider this presentation to be a deep dive into that and just highly focused on that space. But before we go in, typically an audience is about 50-50 on whether or not they know IPONWEB as a company. Most people in ad tech do, and kind of you start getting outside the ad tech environment. Most people don't know IPONWEB. That's largely because our clients are people in the ad tech space. And that's, we build a lot of infrastructure and different pieces and components of a host of different platforms. So when it comes to, just a bit about the company, when it comes to machine learning, it's always been a core competency of IPONWEB. And I think that's supported by, on any given day, on behalf of our clients, we build 6,000 custom bespoke first-party machine learning applications on behalf of our clients. So this is, again, a core of our business. And this is a presentation on where we think machine learning is going to go, and somewhat aligned with the bring your own algorithm that we heard from people like the Trade Desk earlier today. Okay. So we all know this. We hear about this every time someone does an Internet of Things, an IoT presentation. We know that we have a lot of data now, but we also expect it to explode in the future, right? This leads to a situation of very extreme complexity in the information and the data. When you start thinking about how you actually deploy the information and how you combine it to in effect, it gets very complex very, very quickly, right? For an example, if you think about some of the models that we run, if you look at our most complex model that we run for a client, we have about 50 million potential outcomes are in that one model. Just far too complex for any human to process and any human to try to figure out how to apply, right? Now, we're not the only ones that are thinking about this, right? This was a very interesting quote that we saw from Forrester, right? Where there's just too much data. There's too much data and information that this quote says that we're reaching the limits of human cognitive power. I'd say that we're already far beyond that. Right. So this is really, when you start talking and looking about machine learning, you start really you have to really question who's better at processing information and applying information, a human or a machine. Right? We take the side that a machine is infinitely superior to processing and applying information than a human. Right? So when you have that much data and have that information, in order to handle the level of complexity that exists within the data set, that's when you apply the field of machine learning. Now, it's very different. You have to if you look at three different fields, you have a field of big data, which we described in the first slide. The data explodes. How do you handle it? How do you manage that? Right? You have a field of analytics, and then you have a field of machine learning. And how I describe the difference is that analytics is, in the field of analytics, you process the big data for human consumption, which means you have to dumb it down to enough variables that could be understood by a human. And then the interface, the human interface, requires that everything is broken down to just a few dimensions that are understood by a human. And that's the field of analytics. The field of machine learning is you don't dumb the data down to the point that it is understandable by a human. You just apply it to a goal, right? And this is when we start seeing a lot of the movies around artificial intelligence and AI, is that you don't really know what the machine's doing. You just know that it is achieving its goal, right? And that's how I would describe machine learning. And I want to back out and say it's different than the field of analytics, even though they're often confused. Okay. So we feel, just by looking at the trends and talking to our clients, that we feel that machine learning is going to have a very significant impact on the field of digital advertising. We see these quotes from the news publications, but also this Juniper slide, that if you look at the ad spend within the next 5 years, that should be directed to through machine learning. We think it's about 3.5, or they think it's about 3.5 billion today, to a point that it's 42 billion in a 5-year period. So we think this is a huge transformation of how ads are bought and sold, right? And in machine learning, not analytics. That's the point that I want to make. Okay. Now, here's another quote. If you think about machine learning and you're a brand, right? And you have to start, if machine learning is going to be this important to the future, it becomes extremely important to a brand's competitive advantage, right? So when you ask why a brand might be interested in building their own machine learning model, whether or not they have the capability to do it or not, it's important to their competitive advantage in the future. They need to have their machine learning model as opposed to use somebody else's if they are actually going to derive that competitive advantage. Okay. So there are a number of companies out there that can build or have some software, some tools that can build first-party machine learning models on behalf of their clients. IBM Watson's probably the most famous. TensorFlow is an open source version that has been released by Google, and that's a way to build a first-party machine learning model. Prediction.io is an Apache service, right? And as I said, I already mentioned, IPONWEB does a whole bunch of these for our clients as well. But a brand doesn't necessarily need to hire the engineers to do it themselves. They could use services like this to build first-party machine learning models. The question then becomes, where do they put them, and how do they deploy them? Right. So what you see right now in the industry is that there are some interfaces available to deploy some level of analytics or first-party machine learning. The Trade Desk, as we already said, they have their bid multipliers. We saw that. AppNexus has their Bonsai decision trees. DataZoo has its algorithm marketplace, right? Now, each of these are different interfaces, and these interfaces handle vastly different levels of complexity, right? So as I said before, if you look at our most advanced class of models that have 50 million potential outcomes, we cannot take that model and plug it into one of these interfaces because it's just at a level of complexity that vastly exceeds the interfaces that are available today. So you have to look at it, if you look at the current implementation system, is that you have the different interfaces between the different DSPs that will accept, kind of bring your own algorithm. Now, if I'm a brand, I have to develop my model in a certain class that can be plugged into these interfaces, right? And now the interfaces between the DSPs are also different. So we're making a point that if you look at the industry as a whole, there's not a point of distribution, there's not a common point of distribution that a brand could have, that if they developed a superior model class, that they could actually go and take that model class in a complex model and install it into a host of different DSPs. But we also think that that is possible, and we think that's necessary in order for brands to fully adopt and to start developing their own first-party machine learning systems. So we would say, and really what this conversation is, or kind of and what I want to speak to Kieran about, is that we think that the market is ripe and needs something that we're calling open machine learning. Very similar to what OpenRTB did to the bid stream many years ago, where you normalized with the information in the bid stream into an OpenRTB protocol. We think that there's a need for an open machine learning protocol that can handle a superior class of model that could then be installed in a whole range of DSPs. And we think that this needs to happen in order for brands to fully adopt what they're able to do with machine learning, and also in order for the industry to capture that $42 billion of machine learning ad spend in the future. So this is really just we're socializing an idea, really. And to anybody in the room, and to anybody that might read an ExchangeWire article about this topic, does the industry need this open machine learning framework? Right? And if there's hand raisers in the room that want to talk about this and support this effort, then please come and see me after. This is something that we feel strongly about, and we want the industry to adopt. But it's really, if you think about it, what it is that you have an RTB bidder, and that bidder does a whole bunch of does a whole bunch of work about managing supply, managing pacing, et cetera. And how can you separate what we consider a closed-loop first-party machine learning system built by a brand, and to be able to install it into a bidder, and have it to be an open framework so the brand is not necessarily locked into that bidder, right? Where they could go, potentially they have a nice relationship with the Trade Desk. They could deploy it on the Trade Desk, but for some reason that goes sour in the future. They could take that model and bring it over to AppNexus. So that's an idea, and it's really just, we just want to socialize that idea in a public forum to see if anybody else wants to talk about it, and if they do, maybe we'll do it as an industry. And that's the presentation.
first question, right?
Yep.
What the hell is open machine
Open machine
language?
Learning. Right.
OML, you've just created a whole new ad tech.
But again, the purpose of this is like it's a term that we haven't seen yet, right? And so we're introducing a term, introducing a concept, introducing an idea to see if it can be socialized. And we always think that these audiences bring a lot of key people in the industry, and so that's the purpose of this. So what the hell is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So it would be, and I wouldn't even say it is, but the way that we've envisioned it is that it is a model that is output in a certain class or a certain fashion that can be transported from a DSP1 to DSP2 to DSP3, right? I think the closest thing that the industry has to that at the moment, or it's not even our industry, but it is the statistical science space, is that there's a markup language called PMML, which, predictive modeling markup language, which can be output from things like tools like an SPSS, and it's not kind of an advanced class that we're talking about, but there are certain type of protocols that exist in the statistics industry that could be potentially modified in order to handle a complex class that works in the programmatic space.
So would it be sort of an evolution of bring your own algo type thing? So I have a brand, I build my own bespoke algo. So like I'm in the gambling industry and I know exactly how it optimizes my media as per my algorithm. But this fact is that you can take that algorithm and stick it into various DSPs running in the system.
Yep.
So it just feels to me this is kind of like the anti-wall garden approach. I mean, I keep banging on about Facebook and Google, but I just can't get over how much fucking money they make every year. 7 billion in a quarter. Like, so, I mean, is this sort of an antithesis to that domination? Like, so if you take their algo out, then you sort of bring more power back to yourself.
Here's the critical question, I think, to help answer that. If you're a marketer and if you're a brand, right, and you really think that a machine learning application can drive your competitive advantage as a brand, and you've signed up to that, right, it becomes imperative that you own that machine learning model and algorithm, right? In the case of the walled gardens, they own them. Right, so it becomes like there's a conflict there. It's like who runs the model, whose data is being used in the system, and so even in a brand is like conflicted at that point because a brand could give all their data and their information to a Google, to a Facebook. They could do that, right? And then Google and Facebook could use all of their information to build a machine learning system that actually just destroyed their performance, right? But it would still be Google.
That would be fun, but yeah.
It would still be Google and Facebook's model. It would be their black box. Right. What we're proposing is that a brand, even if the performance is inferior in some sense, it becomes their black box, where therefore it's their competitive advantage and it's in their strategic interest in order to build that and deploy it.
So what's the use case then for the rest of the industry to open up to this? Well, what would you say that the advantage is? Because obviously you need the ecosystem work. I'll go on to the brands. Obviously the brands, I take it some brands are thinking we want this, but unless you're able to plug it in to these pieces of tech, it's not really going to fly.
Exactly.
So what's the use case for ad tech to adopt this type of model?
The use case is that brands are at this point. Well, the use case first of all is that it's probably going to take, if this OpenML thing sticks, right? It's going to take 3 to 4 years to adopt widely, much like OpenRTB, right? So this is now in order for a brand to get fully behind an effort of building their own machine learning models, they're going to want to have a point of distribution where they can deploy them that doesn't lock them into the technology provider, right? In the current state, they'd have to build a model. They build it in a format. It locks them into, because of the interface that they have to design it for, it locks them into an existing DSP, right? Now, the enthusiasm that a brand embraces machine learning is going to be dependent on whether or not they are able to have transferability of that knowledge and learning across multiple systems. So in order to fully receive that, kind of a significant chunk of that 42 billion in ad spend, I feel that the industry needs this open environment in order to incent brands to embrace this approach.
Do you think that if we open it up, then the money will flow? I mean,
I feel that the opening up is going to take forever.
Yeah.
right? And I think
in fairness, you're commoditizing a lot of DSPs because they're built on a bespoke algorithm of their own, like, you know.
I mean, some are, some not so much. There are obviously certain things that a DSP could do to add value to a brand's algorithm. I heard one conversation where someone like a DSP would add certain information or vectors or attributes that could go into a brand-specific model, which would give them some point of differentiation. They also differentiate by the inventory they have access to, how they do their bidding, and how they do their pacing systems, their UI. There's plenty of differentiation to what a DSP can still achieve, even though they support something like OpenML.
So, are brands ready for this? I mean, are you having? I mean, obviously you can't talk about conversations, but are you having conversations with big brands who said, we want to build this, this is something we want for ourselves?
I wouldn't say big brands, but I would say machine learning first brands.
Right, so internet first brands, the Netflixes of the world, that type of thing.
Yeah. So those are the type of companies that understand that their machine learning decisioning is it represents the keys to the kingdom. It is imperative to their future and imperative to their strategic position as a company, and so they have a lot of appetite in order to produce those models. And some brands, and those brands will probably develop their own machine learning models, which means they're probably not a really good client for IPONWEB.
Yeah.
But we feel that there's also another set of clients and brands out there that would have the desire to see the strategic imperative advantage, but would need to hire maybe an IBM Watson or an IPONWEB or someone like that to build this model for them. But then it becomes, once this model is built, how is it deployed? Where does it go? Where is it installed? And we're looking for the place to install these models.
And the use case would be that they're able to optimize against their own sort of specific KPI and build that sort of that sort of logic into this.
It's a first-party machine learning model, right? And so the first-party machine learning model, its KPI can be anything. It has to be a number. It has to be a success. So it could be an in-store visit. Could it be a feedback loop from an in-store visit? It could obviously be a conversion. It could be incremental lift. It's like you define what the KPI of the machine is, what the success is, right? Then all the attributes and all the information can also be your first-party information. So is this user a current customer? Is this user a current customer of a big brand or a small brand? And so you build the model around all of your data. And then instead of having, brands talk a lot about having first-party data and creating segments and getting those segments distributed into DSPs. It's similar to that, but it's just instead of being first-party data, it's a first-party machine learning model. Okay. But the point is that there's no place, once you have that model built, current in the industry, I don't know any way to actually take that model and distribute it and to install it into a DSP.
Nate, thanks very much. You've just basically created the next TLA in our industry, OML. I love it. Machine learning, I love it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, OML. So if you want to talk a bit more about Nate, it's going to be out in the lobby. So we've run out of time, so we're going to go for lunch now. But it's definitely a discussion we're going to have going forward because I actually think it's interesting.
I think we're going to see more and more of this. I think we're going to see a lot more. You see agency net groups now launching AI-focused agency groups. I think we're just going to see a lot more around AI, machine learning being driven by agencies, being driven by brands. And I feel as an industry, we need to be prepared for it and knowing the speed of which we work. And sometimes we fight a lot amongst ourselves. That's going to take a while. And so this is really, let's get started because I think that's the next big thing.
All right, Nate. Thanks for a round of applause, please, for Nate. Thank you.